Hey guys, welcome back to another video. As always, towards the middle of the month, I release a monthly update video looking at the freight and trucking market. If you're new here, a warm welcome to you. I teach about the trucking industry with a heavy focus on the spot market as well as freight market analysis. So if this is a topic that interests you, feel free to subscribe down below. All right, let's take a look at what is going on in the trucking market as of February of 2023. Ready? Let's go. So for those of you who have been with me for a while, you know that I start these monthly update videos with diesel prices. And the first thing we're going to look at is a comparison of the national diesel price per gallon for the past 3 months. So the good news is you can see that the diesel prices are continuing to drop, and they dropped quite a bit in February. Maybe not as much as from December to January, but still, it's a great sign. Why is it a great sign? Because this means that this diesel expense is not eating away as much at our net income. Now, I have also started adding this SONAR gauge for diesel truck stop actual price per gallon. And as you can see, this is for a 52-week high and low. The great news is that it's starting to trend towards the 52-week low. And of course, we're going to take a look at the chart view right here. So this is the diesel truck stop actual price per gallon. This is 2023, starts right here. And you can see that, of course, diesel prices are continuing to go down. There was a moment in January where they did go up, but now they're continuing to go down with an average, according to the actual price per gallon, of $4.58 per gallon. But now let's go ahead and take a look at a more detailed view. What are the top 5 most expensive states when it comes to diesel and top 5 least expensive states? So here we go. Now, what I started doing since last month is I started adding that IFTA tax as well, because many of you cleverly mentioned that the price at the pump doesn't really tell us much. What we really need to know is what is the real price per gallon. And to do that, we have to take the pump price minus the tax. So in terms of the price at the pump, the most expensive state is, of course, no surprise here, California at $5.67. Maine is number 2, New York, Washington, and New Hampshire. Basically, what we can see from here is that the West Coast and East Coast have the highest diesel prices. But if we calculate minus the IFTA tax, the real price per gallon, we can see that the most expensive state is actually Maine, whereas the least expensive out of the top 5 is Washington. Now, something to note, both California and Maine, they increased in terms of the diesel prices since last month, while New York, it decreased. Now let's take a look at the other side of the coin. Let's see where it's the cheapest to refuel. So again, we start with the price at the pump. Cheapest state to refuel in on average is Oklahoma, then Texas, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Kansas. Now these are all the 5 states that were the cheapest last month as well, but something's changed. But of course, we have to consider the IFTA tax to get the real price. And in reality, Oklahoma is still the best state to refuel in, and the worst is Texas, as painful as it is to admit. Now, compared to last month, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Kansas, they all increased in terms of the average price per gallon, whereas Missouri and Texas, they decreased. Okay, now on to freight, and yes, absolutely, I will attach these charts down below. I know they're hard to see. So the first thing I want to look at is the volumes versus tender rejections on a national level. And this chart shows the past year. Now, if we look at the past year, volume is this blue line right here. The white line is the tender rejection rate. And I'll explain those a little bit later on. Now, if we look at this past year, we of course can see that volume has been trending slowly down over the past year. Not a surprise. 2022, the beginning of 2022, was still riding that high of 2021, and then everything started kind of going down. Now, I know this is going down. However, if we look at the year to date, a closer look, again, volumes are in blue, we can see that actually since the beginning of the year, which is right here, coming off the holidays, of course, volumes shot up. This is normal. This is completely normal because during holidays, there's no volume. Everyone is resting. But the good news is they shot up. Yes, they decreased a little bit, but now they're kind of remaining the same and they're actually increasing a little bit as of the 13th of February. Now, this is a great thing because volumes, they tell us what is the demand for trucks like. The bad news is that the tender rejections show us the other side. What is the supply of trucks like, right? And if we go back to this yearly overview, the white line, the tender rejections, you can see they dropped off a cliff from the beginning of 2022 until May, and then have been slowly trickling down. Now, if we look at a closer view, you can see that the tender rejections are really, really low. However, there is a little bit, maybe a little bit of hope. Maybe I'm being a little too hopeful here, but there was a little bit of a jump, and now it's kind of plateauing. Now, why are tender rejection rates important? Number one, there's a strong correlation. The higher the tender rejection rate, the higher the load prices on the market. But another thing is that tender rejection rates show us the supply of trucks in the market compared to the demand for trucks. And the lower the tender rejection rate, the more trucks there are in the market, right? So what we can see here is that even though volume is remaining stable, there are still too many trucks in the market. Now, another chart I found, and I think it's very, very helpful to know, is the tender rejection rates by the length of haul. So we have long haul in blue, which is 800 miles or more, 800 loaded miles or more. Tweener haul, I did not make up that name. I don't know who did. Don't judge me. I'm innocent in all of this. But tweener hauls are 450 to 800 mile hauls. Mid haul is from 250 to 450 miles. And then there's short hauls, 100 to 250 miles. But what we can see is that tweener hauls, which is from 450 to 800 miles, are the ones where the tender rejections are the highest. The worst tender rejections are for those long hauls, the blue line, which is at 3.32, as you can see. Short hauls are second worst, and second best is the mid hauls. But if you want to make more money, it seems like those 450 to 800 mile loads, those tweener hauls, are the ones that pay the best, whereas long hauls, they pay the worst. Now, this is a chart I found on SONAR that unfortunately is only available for dry vans and reefers. But basically, this is the FreightWaves scientific 28-day forecast for spot rates. Now, let me read this to you from SONAR. This algorithm takes into account multiple data points such as tender data, operational cost, and demographic information, and projects these 28 days into the future. According to SONAR, these rates provide a predictive outlook for national spot rate movement over a 28-day period. So what we have here is this blue line is the reefer, right? And this blue to white line is the dry van. And what we can see right now, we're at the 16th, right? This is where we are right now. What we can see is towards the end of February, towards like the 20th, the rates will start shooting up, which is great. And I really, really hope it materializes. Now, the reason I'm cautiously optimistic about this is not because this predictive scientific prediction of the rate per mile has not been correct before. It has. They actually very often underestimate the rate per mile, but show the correct pattern of where the rates are going, whether they're going down or up. So this is correct. What I'm cautiously optimistic about is that these rates will change or start climbing up so soon by the end of February. I still believe that it's going to be somewhere in March or April, but I do agree with the trajectory of the rates. Now, usually at this point, I talk about the capacity in the market and I use the charts and graphs provided by DAT. Now, I decided not to include those in this video because DAT is not completely accurate, because the way they measure capacity is by looking at their own data. How many trucks are posted on DAT versus how many loads are posted on DAT. Now, the thing is, not everyone posts their trucks and not all brokers post their loads. And if they do, they might be using a different load board. So instead, we're going to be looking at this 3D map to get an overview of February as a whole. So this map looks at all equipment types over the past week, how everything has changed over the past week. The height of an area shows how many trucks have increased or decreased in the market. So the higher the area, the more trucks there are in that market. The redder an area, the more volume dropped from last week. The bluer an area, the more volume increased. If there is no color, if it's just gray, then there was no change. If we look at a market like California right here, where there's a ton of trucks, you see it's very high. There's a ton of capacity, but it's red, which means that the volume decreased from last week. This means that this is a market you want to stay away from, because this is a market where the rates will be crap. There are too many trucks, too few loads. Now, if we look at the map as a whole, we can see that capacity is continuing to increase, especially around, I don't know what to call it, the borders of the United States. You can see it's highest here, like across the border, right? In the middle, it's not so bad, but on the borders, it's really high. There's a ton of capacity there. In terms of volumes, the red means that volumes decreased in those markets, and we can see markets like Michigan, we have the West Coast here, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, volumes decreased in those places. But some states, for example, South Dakota right here, Montana, although I don't recommend going to Montana. We have some parts of Kentucky, North Carolina, Missouri right here, parts of Oklahoma, Tennessee. Those are places where volumes did experience an increase over the past week. Now, let me show you capacity a little clearer, because this height makes it very, very difficult. So here's another map for you guys. The bluer an area here, the more trucks came into the market from last week. The redder an area, the more trucks left the market, which means there is less capacity. So you can see in general, if we look at it in the big picture, everything is pretty much blue. There are some areas like Colorado, we have Texas, we have Michigan, we have Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, North Carolina, Vermont. These are places where capacity kind of started leaving, but for the most part, it's blue, which means that we still have an issue with too many trucks in the market. Now, even though capacity remains to be a huge issue in the industry, there are just way too many trucks in the market. I did read an interesting article by FreightWaves yesterday saying that while trailer orders are remaining strong, it's more about trailer replacement rather than adding capacity. So according to FreightWaves, and I quote, "There is a lot of replacement ordering in certain segments as customers want a younger fleet and they don't want to change their normal replacement cycles. We do see capacity additions in some fleets, but I'd say it is trending more to replacement as a percentage of orders versus the past couple of years." Now, this is not bad news. Even though trailer orders are remaining strong, the fact that it's to replace existing equipment means that capacity is not being added, which is, it's good news. In terms of my own experience with February, well, let's just say I'll have a pretty interesting video to share with you guys at the end of the month when I show you our results, our performance results. I deviated from my strategy once for one of our dry vans, my strategy being staying in the Midwest, and this threw us off course completely for that dry van. This week, he delivered a load to Utah that I panic booked from Maryland. And of course, Utah for dry vans, it's pretty much a kiss of death. So guess what kind of load I booked from Utah that I had to book in advance so that it wouldn't go away? $1.70 some cents to Florida. Yep, chastise me now. I'm honestly terrified of next week when it comes time to deliver this load, and I'll have to look for a new one, because Florida is the second place where it's a kiss of death for dry vans, reefers, and pretty much flatbeds as well. Now for reefers, because the West Coast, specifically the Pacific Northwest, has been off limits to us pretty much because of that I-80 that keeps closing down and we keep losing time on it, it has been a struggle. Again, just as a reminder, my reefers are operated by my team members, company drivers, so miles are very important. And let me tell you, trying to get a load that has the miles, pays a good rate so we can make some money, and avoiding the Pacific Northwest entirely, yeah, it's no easy feat. Basically, February has been challenging, but I am hopeful for the future. So hopeful, in fact, that my business partners and I just ordered 2 new trucks yesterday. One which will replace an older unit of ours, and another one which will be adding to our fleet. Now, to summarize, February is always a quiet month in trucking, and this is even in the best of times. Now, the challenges we all face in February, yes, they are elevated on one hand because we're coming off a very bad year in the trucking industry. But on the other hand, it is normal for this time of year. It's a normal part of the trucking market cycle. Anyway, guys, I think this video has been long enough. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next one.